Welcome back, BioMonsters. Today we're going to be talking about the different types of cells that are found in living things. But we're going to challenge you. Instead of us giving you a movie and simply having you fill in pre-prepared Cornell notes, we want you to be able to take information from a reading and create your Cornell notes from scratch. How are we going to have you do this? Well, we're going to have you follow 3 simple tasks. Let's look at the first task. Before you read, we want you to use the headings in the reading to make your essential questions. So let's quickly take a look at our reading. According to what we see on the screen, we notice that we have 3 different topics or 3 different headings for 3 different paragraphs in our reading. Let's go ahead and highlight those 3 headings. The first one says, the classification of living things. The second topic, or the second heading, is prokaryotes. And then last but not least, our last heading is the word eukaryotes. Now that we know where our 3 headings are, the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and turn those headings into essential questions. So how do we take something like this, the classification of living things, and create an essential question about that specific topic? Well, all we have to do is turn this statement into a question. Maybe we can turn that into the following. How do we classify living things? So there, we've just turned our first topic into an essential question. And if all goes well, we should be able to find the answer to that question in this body of text. All right, let's hop down to the next heading. Our next heading says prokaryotes. Well, we've never talked about that term before, and that's simply a one-word statement. How can we turn that one-word statement into a question? Well, you're probably already asking yourself something about that specific word because it's a weird word, and again, it's new to you. So if we don't know what this word means, it should be fairly easy to turn that into an essential question. We can just simply state, what are prokaryotes? So there we have essential question number 2. Now we can move on to our last topic, which is eukaryotes. And the great thing about this is that we can pretty much take this question and just swap out this one word. So here we've turned prokaryotes, this heading, into what are prokaryotes, which means that we can essentially do the same thing. So now for my heading eukaryotes, I'm simply going to turn it into the following question. What are eukaryotes? For our next task, it says, as you read, highlight only information related to your essential question. First essential question reads, how do we classify living things? We want to keep that question in mind as we read the paragraph of text below that particular heading. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can find the answers to that particular question. There are lots of different and interesting types of living things on our planet. I think you already knew that though. You've probably seen an abundance of unique organisms like giraffes, mushrooms, worms, alligators, grasshoppers, bacteria, algae, and apple trees. Did you know that all of these very different organisms are divided into 2 categories? Well, that's important. So we know that we're classifying things into one of 2 categories. So I'm going to put a marker around that because that's important. That's right. Every living thing on the planet can be classified into 2 groups based on the cells that make them up. So let's talk about these cells. I hope that you already knew that cells are the basic unit of life and that all living things are composed of cells. Although all cells have some things in common, each type of cell also has unique characteristics that make them easy to identify. Let's focus on these unique characteristics. So I've already found some useful bits of information that answer this particular question for paragraph number 1. Now that I've done that, I want to go and switch over and actually start filling in some information in my Cornell notes. All right, so here we are at our Cornell notes. The very first thing that I need to do is fill in my essential question on the left-hand side. So because this is my first essential question, I'm going to write the number 1. And if I go back just to refresh my memory, I can see that my first question is, how do we classify living things? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write that question down. How do we classify living things? Now, what we need to do on the right-hand side is find the information that we highlighted in the paragraph that actually answers that question and write it down right here. So let's go back to our paragraph. If we look through, I'm going to get to the very first thing that I highlighted. So I notice here it says different organisms are divided into 2 categories. So that's an important piece of information that answers that question. So I'm going to write it down here. So I'm going to make a bullet. All living things are classified into 2 categories. Now let me go back and see if I can fill in some more information. The next thing that I highlighted said that the classification into these 2 groups is based on the types of cells that make them up. So the type of cell determines which category they're going to go into. So I'm going to do another little bullet right here. The type of cell found in the organism determines which category the living thing will be placed in. So I have 2 really good bits of information. I'm going to go back and make sure that I'm not missing anything else. So if I keep looking, I keep looking, I see that cell types, not only do they have some things in common, each cell type also has unique characteristics that make them easy to identify. So right here, I'm going to indent a little bit and I'm going to say all cells have some, and I'm going to underline that because that's important, some things in common. But if I kept reading, if I go back to my paragraph, I'll notice, but regardless of having some things in common, cell types also have unique characteristics that make them easy to identify. So I'm going to write cells also have unique characteristics that make them easy to identify. Great. Now let me go back to my paragraph and make sure that I'm not missing any more information. So it looks like I've included this, I've included this, I've also included this, as well as this. So I've put all the key information that answers my essential question that I got from my topic or my heading that was on top of my paragraph. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and look at our second paragraph. For our second paragraph, remember our heading is prokaryotes, and we've turned that into the following essential question: what are prokaryotes? So the only thing that we want to highlight or circle or underline are things that answer that question. So here we go. Our first cell type is called a prokaryotic cell or a prokaryote. These cells are unique because they are only found in the smallest organisms on the planet, bacteria. So only bacteria are prokaryotes. Some scientists believe that these bacterial cells or prokaryotes were the very first life forms on Earth. That still answers this question, so I'm going to underline it. That means that these cells have been on the planet longer than any other living thing. So bacteria are very old. So what makes bacterial cells different from other types of cells? These prokaryotic cells are very simple and small. It's their simplicity that makes them so easy to recognize. Prokaryotes do not have, that's really important, so we're talking about what they don't have. Prokaryotes do not have any membrane-bound organelles or cell parts. That means that these bacterial cells don't have a nucleus. To help us remember that, it says prono. Prono. I'm going to highlight that because that's really important. That's crazy. Their DNA just floats around. So what does this all mean? Prokaryotes are the simplest of all cell types. They're very small, unicellular, and they do not have a nucleus. So that last sentence pretty much wraps up all the important things. They're the simplest, they're small, they're unicellular, meaning they only have one cell, and they do not have a nucleus. So all of this information gives me what I need to answer the topic question or my essential question, which is, what are prokaryotes? So let's see if we can go back now to our Cornell notes and fill some stuff in. Remember, the first thing that we need to fill in is, what are prokaryotes? All right, now we're back on our Cornell notes, so I'm going to go ahead and write a number 2 here, so I know that we're going to start with our second essential question. I'm also going to draw a line separating my information for essential question number 1 from essential question number 2 so I don't get confused when I'm studying. So my second essential question is, what are prokaryotes? All right, let's go back and see what some of the first pieces of information were that I underlined. So it says our first cell type is a prokaryotic cell or prokaryote, which is included in our question. We're going to keep reading, and it says they're only found in the smallest organisms on the planet, bacteria. So the only example of a prokaryote would be bacteria. So the only example, and I'm just going to do this to make it simple, is bacteria. Now I'm going to go back and see what else I can find. So I'm going to check this off. I know I've done that. The next thing says that they were the very first life forms on Earth. So they are really old. So let's write that. The oldest life on Earth. I'm going to keep going and see what else I can find. It also says they're very simple and small. So let's write that. So they're also simple, they're small, and if I go back and look again, I also notice that it says they do not have any membrane-bound organelles. So I'm going to write that. They're simple, small, and there's no membrane-bound organelles. That looks good to me so far. I'm going to keep going. The next thing that we see here, it says that they don't have a nucleus. This is one of the most important things that differentiates or separates prokaryotes from other life forms. And then there's a little memory clue here. And remember, memory clues are our friends. No. So let's go ahead and write that down. So also, prokaryotes have no nucleus. And to help us remember that, I'm going to draw an arrow and color it in to help my brain pay attention to this specific spot on my Cornell notes. And I'm going to write pro in big, bold letters. Pro, no, exclamation point, so I don't forget. So no, so I remember that they have no nucleus. And then another thing that I see is that they just have their DNA floating around because they don't have a place to store it. So no nucleus. I'm going to go ahead and make an indentation here and say the DNA just floats around. If I keep going, I'm going to see that they're the simplest. And again, I've already put that. Let's double check and make sure that I've written that. So they're simple, so I have that. That just reiterates an important point. They're small, I've already said that. They do not have a nucleus, I've already said that. The last thing that I need to write that I did not write yet is that they are unicellular. So let's go ahead and write that. They are unicellular. unicellular. And let's write the definition of that so that we don't forget it, because that's kind of a new term for us. If something is unicellular, this prefix uni means the number 1, right? So that means it's one cell. It's made up of one cell. So it looks like we have all the information that we need to answer essential question number 2. Let's go back. We know that we have one more that we need to answer. And I'm going to go ahead and make a separation on my Cornell notes so again I don't get confused and I know all of this information answers question number 2. Let's go back and look at question number 3, or essential question number 3. And essential question number 3 is just asking, what are eukaryotes? So we want to find all of the information that provides the answer for that essential question. So here we go. It says, if bacteria are the only living examples of prokaryotes, everything else on the planet must be composed of eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotes are much bigger than prokaryotes. Some eukaryotic cells are even large enough to be seen without a microscope. Eukaryotic cells are complex. That's really important. They have lots of different rooms or compartments inside of them. These rooms are called membrane-bound organelles. Some examples of these rooms are mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum. The most important organelle in eukaryotic cells is its nucleus. That's important because we knew that prokaryotes don't have a nucleus based on what we've just read. This is the control center of the cell. Eukaryotes have a brain, and the brain is the nucleus, that can control lots of different cellular activities at one time. This means that eukaryotes can grow much larger than prokaryotic cells and control lots of unique cellular activities at once. All multicellular organisms are eukaryotes, including you. And the memory clue to help you remember that is right here. You are a eukaryote. You are a eukaryote. Now, let's quickly go back and look at our Cornell notes. I know that the very first thing that I have to do is actually fill in my essential question. So my essential question for number 3 is, what are eukaryotes? So now here's your challenge. I've already with you highlighted the important information from the reading. We've already written down the essential question, and we've already practiced taking notes with the first 2 essential questions on our Cornell notes that you can see on the screen. Now here's what we want you to do. We want you to take the information that we've highlighted together for the section labeled eukaryotes and see if you can come up with a good set of notes on the right-hand side. Once you've done that on your own, raise your hand and call your instructor over so we can check your work for accuracy. Good luck.